The Republican members that are here today, what have you all done to help Joe Biden in this year that you all have waited for?
All right, so that's a ridiculous and silly question. I want to commend you for being the media and telling it Democrat policy. So let me ask you something.
Come on, man, that's been going on for 20 years.
Yeah, okay, hey, let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. What rate of illegal immigration did we have in 2020? Do you know anything? I asked you a question. Do you know anything?
How long have you been in office?
I've been in office 11 years now.
And this has been kick the count during multiple administrations.
Except okay, you don't get to argue with me. You asked your question. You asked your question. You don't get. You want to hold a press conference? You can do it over there.
You want
to hold a press conference? You can do it over there.
How are you?
So hold on. I'm going to answer his question.
Things are heating up here in Texas. And no, I'm not just talking about the fact that it's still 90 degrees outside in October. No, I'm talking about the Senate race between Ted Cruz and his Democratic challenger, Colin Allred.
Folks are saying around the country what we know to be true here in Texas, which is that I'm going to beat Ted Cruz.
The latest polls are promising. Allred has broken the tie and is finally up by 1 point. Ted, I love to remind people, came dangerously close to losing his seat to the frightfully progressive for Texas, Beto O'Rourke, in 2018. So while a 1 point lead is hardly anything to get excited over usually, it is somewhat significant here in Texas. Of course, it's still within the margin of error, and these polls are less than reliable on the best days. On top of that, Texans are reluctant to hope because our hopes have been dashed so many times before. But why was Ted Cruz so antagonistic toward the guy in the clip we watched?
Except okay, you don't get to argue with me. You asked your question. You asked your question.
Ted was asked what he's done to work with the Biden administration, and it was a reasonable question because after serving as the senator from Texas for 11 years now, Ted Cruz is trying to rebrand his image going into November's election. He's trying to tell people who he is now, which is apparently different from who he has been for the last 11 years. And who he is now is bipartisan. And according to Cruz, he's really always been bipartisan.
This border deal was misguided from the beginning. Why is that? Because this deal was drafted by the Democrats. It was negotiated with the Democrats.
In an interview with Politico, Cruz, who's known for being super partisan actually, said that his reputation for being one of the most hardline members of the Senate just isn't right. He said, "What is new is not that I'm passing bipartisan legislation that helps produce jobs in Texas. I've been doing that since the day I arrived in the Senate. What is new is we're finally getting the press to report on it." The man has a right-wing podcast that he spends more time hosting than he does governing, not to mention the fact that he was a key part of the January 6th attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. And speaking of which, when he was asked by Caitlin Collins on CNN if he would accept the 2024 election results, he called the question ridiculous, which seems to be his go-to when he gets asked questions he doesn't like, and then he proceeded to not really answer the so-called ridiculous question.
You were the first senator to object to the votes. Mm-hmm. In 2024, will you certify the election results? Do you plan to object, or will you accept the results regardless of who wins the election?
So Caitlin, I got to say, I think that's actually a ridiculous question.
It's a yes or no question, though.
No, it's not. Let me explain why it's a ridiculous question. It's not a question. You've ever asked a Democrat that?
Of course.
What Democrat?
But what Democrats?
Hold on a second. What Democrats challenge it?
What Democrats? I know. I've been down this road many times. But no Democrat. You cannot compare the two situations. We have talked about that. We've seen the audio of that when they protested on the Senate floor.
Hold on a second.
But has you ever had a sitting president who refused to facilitate the peaceful transition of power, refused to acknowledge that his successor won the presidency?
So, we did have a peaceful transfer of power. I was there on January 20th. I was there on the swearing in.
Barely.
Following the January 6th insurrection, Cruz called the riot a terrorist attack only to later recant after Tucker Carlson pressed him on it. He said that it would be ridiculous for him to call people protesting a terrorist attack. He was talking specifically about the really dangerous people who committed violence against cops. Those were the terrorists. Suddenly, it's not so cool to be a far-right sucking up to Trump who called your wife ugly MAGA Republican podcaster. Not only that, but it's not cool to be a Republican in a state where the maternal death rate has increased by 56% after a Republican-led abortion ban went into effect in 2019. And the people of Texas know who to blame for this. While the Republicans call us childless cat ladies with no stake in our futures, women in Texas and other similar states across the country are afraid to get pregnant because of Republican policies. Check out this ad that's currently running here in Texas.
It's gotten more dangerous to be a woman in Texas.
And it's Ted Cruz's fault.
He fought for an abortion ban that goes too far.
They didn't just make it illegal to have an abortion, they made it illegal for me to do my job.
So whether you were raped or something went tragically wrong and your life is at risk,
Women are now forced to flee Texas for care. I'm not a political person.
but seeing what I've seen,
I can never vote for Ted Cruz.
I can never vote for Ted Cruz.
I was watching Bob's Burgers the other night, which is like my feel-good show when I don't want to think about the world or anyone in it, and it was interrupted with Ted Cruz, of all people. Gotta love election season. Also, did Hulu change something? Like, why am I getting ads there now? Anyway, Ted is now trying to toe the line that he has so often scorned. He's voted to not shut down the government, which is nice of him. He insists that his vote against IVF and birth control access wasn't because he doesn't actually support those things. It was because it was a backdoor Democrat-led effort to skirt abortion laws in red states, so he says. Also, he's voted for tax relief for hurricane victims. How interesting. As we get closer to November, the moniker of Cancun Cruz is lurking behind Ted as he campaigns across Texas. Texans have not forgotten, nor have they forgiven, the way that when faced with our own natural disaster, a disaster, by the way, that was largely manufactured by incompetent Republican leadership, fled the state for Cancun rather than stay and do his job. And the people who supported Ted Cruz through him leaving the state love to ask, well, what could he have done anyway? Well, solidarity with the people that you campaigned to serve would have been literally the least you could have done. But Beto O'Rourke, who lost the Senate race to Ted Cruz, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who doesn't even live in Texas, certainly found a way to help. AOC aided with food drives and distribution, and Beto organized heating zones and arranged for safe transportation for the elderly to get them to those heating zones. Ted did nothing and then lied about it once he was caught. Then he went to Florida to make fun of the Texans who were mad at him for leaving and then lying. And that incident will hopefully haunt Ted Cruz right out of office in November. Never forget. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more.